Welcome to the 775 Alive podcast, your rural Nevada headquarters for decoding politics, economics, and general global shenanigans. I'm Crystal Newton, your business strategist, breaking down why Nevada's hustle is stronger than a sagebrush root in a windstorm. Here with my trusty co-host, Scott Gaborski, PhD historian, here to explain the smart lessons of history, even if we are likely to ignore them. Grab your boots for a wild ride through today's most important news.
Well, welcome back to 775 Alive. We're back at it again. We're going to have a lot of interesting stuff coming your way here over the next few months because, of course, it is midterm election season starting here in Nevada.
Midterms are everywhere. We just ended our candidate filing period, which means we're kicking off and off to the races. But also, we're looking at this happening across the country. We've got stuff going on at the federal level, state level, local level, and we're going to peel that apart for you today, hopefully.
Right, or at least some of it. Again, this is going to be an evolving sort of process. It always is. Texas, of course, a couple weeks ago had their primary election. Some surprises out of that, particularly in the Crockett and Tallarico race. You were down there for that, weren't you?
I was in San Antonio, and I was there on business. I was there for a little over a week, and during that time, I had to get my nails touched up. So I went to the nail salon. And I got a chance to ask every gal there in the nail salon, I'm like, what do you think about this political race going on? I was pretty excited. And actually, Texans are pretty cool. Every one of them had an opinion and they were willing to share. It was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're going to have some more surprises, I think, coming out as more states go on into this midterm. And, of course, the big story right now out of Nevada, for those of you who haven't been around, that impacts the federal race is, of course, Mark Amodei, our representative for CD2, which is basically the northern, a little bit more than a third of the state, right, up here in our area, announced his retirement back in February.
Yeah, that's caused quite a bit of chaos. So we're looking for a replacement for him. But also, I wanted to ask you, Scott, I know we're looking at a ton of people leaving Congress at the federal level. And I'm wondering if you think there's something bigger at play here. Are traditional politicians deciding they don't want to be a part of Congress anymore? Do you have any thoughts on why we're seeing so many retirements?
Well, I think there's a couple things going on because it's really been across the board right now. A lot of the media makes a lot of it focuses a lot on the Republican retirements. Some of those came from candidates that rode earlier Trump waves that have proved not to be very effective in Congress, and probably we're not going to survive re-election. Probably the best example of that is Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, some of it is some people who probably needed to retire years ago. Right? The politics we're facing now is not the politics of the '90s that so many of them came up in. So I think you're seeing some natural attrition. Of course, again, it pays it off. It's far more retirements than we normally see.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's the most historically, and in fact, I'm almost willing to bet it is not for various reasons. But go ahead.
From my perspective, I've the last 20 years, all I've heard is people say people need to retire. There needs to be term limits, and I just get the impression that getting these people to retire is a hard thing to do. But now all of a sudden, we're facing a midterms where a ton of people are retiring, so it makes me feel like there's something inorganic at play here, which it lends to my belief that maybe Congress has become so dysfunctional that some of these people are like, I don't want a part of this anymore.
Well, I mean, that's always a possibility. I actually don't think Congress is that misfunctional or dysfunctional at the moment. In fact, I'd point to the fact that we got back to regular budget order, an example where Congress is getting back to where it's supposed to do. I still hold that's one of the principal achievements of this Congress is getting back to that regular budget order where you pass the 12 separate budget bills. Right?
Yeah.
Massive omnibuses. But at the same time, and again, just to shout out, that has been one of Amodei's goals for the last at least 6-8 years, is getting back to that regular budget order. Right?
Yeah.
Being at events and trying to explain to people we can't shut down the government for this omnibus. That's not productive. We need to get back to regular budget order. I think that factored in a bit to his decision to retire. I mean, it's exhausting. It's exhausting for him because Reno doesn't have a direct flight to Washington, so it's always a two-stage process to come back and forth. And I just think, he was basically exhausted. I always thought if he ran this term, he would have almost certainly been elected. I couldn't see how he wouldn't. But I thought this term, that by 2028, he would have been out anyway. So he just moved it up 2 years. But again, he does that having successfully met a major goal of his, right?
Yeah.
But that might also be on the dysfunction, and that's where I think there might be a problem on this issue of dysfunction, right? Getting back to regular budget order might mean that actually cuts down some of the pork, some of the funds through the trough, because you don't need to put them in there to get these omnibus passes. And it might have just been that some of these people are like, I don't want a Congress where I actually have to work. So that's always a possibility. The better part of me wants to hope that's exactly what it is. But no, I think it's a combination of factors, and a lot of it's individual based on the candidates.
Yeah. So Mark Amodei, I just want to say really quick, he served our country in the military, and then he served our country as a congressperson, and he's served the state of Nevada. I just big thank you to Mark Amodei. I like him personally as a person, and I'm sad that he has to go, but I trust his decision-making skills that that's the right thing. So we have an onslaught of candidates to take his place.
Well, which is something we can actually blame Mark a bit for that onrush of candidates, right? Because the announcement really was sort of at the last minute. And then there was this long pause where it wasn't clear where we're going to go, right? And for me, this is my little rant. Most of you probably know I'm the chair of the Elko County Republican Party. I basically spent almost the last month every day phone calls about this CD2 race and what's going to happen, what's going on, blah, 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 blah. And it's just, we're organizing Lincoln Day dinners and everything else in between. It's been exhausting. So by the time we get to Saturday night, I love Mark too, but I'm just like, oh man, I can't. I need to tell you what you've done to us.
Yeah, you're considering at your Elko Lincoln Day dinner, which was amazingly successful. Congratulations on putting that on. I was lucky enough to attend, and it was wonderful. But you had even made a joke. You're like, I'm not even going to announce all the CD2 candidates because there's too many, and we have to get to other things.
Right. So we're up. I think there's what now? I'd have to redo the count, and as we're recording this, it's just closed. So there's still this period where candidates might not totally meet qualifications for whatever reason, and not filing their financial disclosure statements and all that. But it looks like there's, I think, 27 candidates in total for that CD2, right? And at least 16 of them are Republican. I mean, it's just a bizarre race.
Well, and for people who don't know, CD2, it's Congressional District 2. Nevada has 4 congressional districts, and those effectively become your House of Representatives members in Congress. So the people that represent Nevada in Congress, CD1, 2, 3, and 4. CD2 is the only one that's occupied by Republicans. So it's a very important seat to us. So that's why we talk about it a lot.
Well, and then, we both, well, not any longer for you, but we both spent most of, when we started this podcast, we were both living up here. In the CD2 district. And you're right. So CDs 1 and 3, of course, are totally within Clark County. CD4, we spent a lot of time on because that's sort of the lower half, the southern half of the 775, which is, of course, we did the interviews with Cody Whipple and Dave Flippo, back late last year when they were locked in a primary. And, of course, one of the CD2 candidates, Dave Flippo, jumped up here to run for CD2.
Yep.
Right. Along with a whole host of other candidates, when you have these types of races, some people jump into them that probably shouldn't. Some people, this is going to be their first experience. They might continue on with it, so it's good for them to get an L under their belt, so to speak.
Yeah.
So they know what campaigning is like. So and we had a ton of them. I think we had 8 of the 16 at our Lincoln Day dinner. Right?
Yeah.
Which was always a problem because we do assigned seating. You can't have them at the same table. You can't put them somewhere with the state constitutional officer candidates, of which we had 6 of those in attendance as well. So we only had 28 tables and we were trying to divvy up these candidates, right? It was a mess.
Well, and as much as I like to complain about how CD2 is going down, I do want to say that it's wonderful when people run for office. You can learn a ton about your government and the people that live in your community. I encourage everyone to run for office, even though they always give me a deer in the headlights look when I say that. I'm like, there's not really a college degree or certificate that qualifies you to do this. The qualification is that you're a resident and that you're a human being. That's it. So, it's, go try it. Run for office. And certainly if someone's running unopposed, you got to jump in there and give them a challenge. That's the great thing about democracy.
Yeah. And that's one of the things. Do we want to go ahead and do this now or?
Sure.
Yeah. So if you don't know, one of the big changes here, of course, 775 Alive, we're not exactly journalism in the traditional sense, but we want to have these conversations in part because what we're trying to do is share our experience out here in the 775 and bridging this rural-urban divide, right? But that's been complicated a bit because we just want to be upfront with everybody and be open. Both Crystal and I are actually running for office this year,
That's right.
right? I went ahead and filed for Elko County Commissioner for, District 2. So you have to live in one of the 5 districts in Elko County, but the county as a whole gets to vote for you. And if you saw me smirk when Crystal made the unopposed announcement, I found out Friday when the filing period closed, I actually didn't draw a candidate or an opponent, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, not an opponent for the primary, but not even for the general election. So that went well.
Well, my experience is the exact opposite of yours, and it's going to be fun to go through this election cycle and really see where people are at and how things work out. I know you've really laid the groundwork in Elko County and actually went through a year of people asking you to run before you decided to run. And so that's a very different experience than me. I moved to Las Vegas a few months ago to complete my patent investment. And I just got the email from the Clark County Republican Party that was like, hey, these districts are running unopposed. If you're in these districts, think about running. And of course, I go on to the Secretary of State's website and I'm like, what district am I in? And I'm like, oh, look at that. The Democrats running unopposed. So I jumped in.
Yeah, and that's AD.
That's the exact opposite experience of you. So we're going to see how those two things go. And maybe we can inspire some people to run and maybe peel back the onion layers a little bit. This is not magic. It's not anything special. It's just two people that care about their country trying to make a difference.
Yeah, and of course we're not using this as a campaign platform, and we are going to continue to talk to people across the political spectrum because these are conversations we need to have. But it is sort of interesting in thinking about this and talking about these issues. So of course I've long had an interest up here in sort of the politics, right? So I've been a fixture for years. Really started when I was working with the Census Bureau, and then my private consulting work where there was always something going on. I needed to know what counties are doing, needed to know what cities are doing. So I spend a lot of time basically sitting in council meetings, sitting before county commission meetings, learning this stuff, right? And I'm very passionate about the stuff here. I mean, people up here have gotten so tired of me saying that Elko County is the youngest county in the state, and how that creates a policy differential from other rural counties in Nevada, which are assumed to be old and dying. And in fact, I mentioned it as part of the festivities Saturday night, our Lincoln Day dinner, and a Assembly woman, Danielle Gallant from down in Las Vegas, was up here. She's running for, I think it's SD20. I have to double check that. But she came up at our dinner, and we had breakfast. A number of us had breakfast the next morning, and we're sort of chatting. And she's like, I was shocked when you said that. I went and looked it up, and that's incredibly interesting. So even members of our current legislature don't understand how young Elko County is.
Yeah.
And again, just like this podcast, that was one of the things that drew me to that concept of public service is that, look, there's a lot of this stuff going on. It's impacting how policies are getting conducted. It's impacting where we're seeing. Elko is changing. Right? We're not going to be able to stop it, nor should we want to. So part of what got me interested is, look, we're going to have to manage this some way, right? We can't just ignore change or, try to put our foot in the door and we're just going to get ran over. So that's what drew me into it is, I want to live someplace 5-10 years down the road that's really set up to handle what's really going on.
Yeah. And I know we're not supposed to advocate for anything, but your resume is amazing. You left out your work with First 5 Nevada for
Right.
Education of children for the first 5 years of their life. What's their experience? That's a big deal. You're one of the people in Nevada that goes and visits and interacts with Indian Native reservations. Mm-hmm. And you've also worked for the census. Like, that's pretty awesome. But again, we're going too far into, I'm not trying to platform.
Well, no, I do need to do something since you went ahead and done this, right? I guess to meet up with federal regulations. I'm Scott Gaworski and I approve this message. Okay, go on.
And me, my big thing, you're always, going on and on about how Elko is young, and I'm always going on and on about how Nevada's legislature is unbalanced. And so that's really what I've led with in running for office is I'd like to even out the legislature, make sure that everyone's represented. It's, Democrat ideas are great. I understand why they have them, but they're incomplete without the other side. And so I really do want to aim for striking a balance instead of making a partisan war here,
Right. And that's one of the things that's going to be interesting. Of course, we've talked as well, getting back to the bigger picture, right? One of the things that's been going on is Elko County in particular, whether it's because of the youth, whether it's because we do have like rest of the state, we have a large nonpartisan population, about 35%, 35.5% of the active voters right now. who, people find that attractive. And one of the things we're seeing about this is going to make this election a little different, is we're seeing a lot of attention being paid to Elko County, particularly by the Democratic Party.
Mhm.
This is not, I mean, we're well over 50% active Republican registration. Democrat registration in this area has been dropping for at least the last 6 or 8 years, right? They've gone from about 16% of the voter pool down to about 11%, right? And that's in absolute numbers, not just percentage points, right? Their absolute numbers have dropped as well. But we've had Ro Khanna, right? California Assemblyman who's going to be running for president in 2028, or Congressman, I'm sorry. He's been through here twice. I actually sat down with him at an event that I was invited to with him.
It
We've
was just a
had,
few weeks ago. You were like,
right.
you texted me, you're like, I'm having breakfast with Ro Khanna. And I was like, the California Democrat? What? What?
Yeah, it was sort of funny, and of course, the newspaper has it splashed out that the chair of the Republican Party was at this event. But no, we need to talk, and we've had, going back to that Constitution celebration we had last year, where we had the Democrats and the Independent American Party out there together. We have deep policy differences, no doubt about that. But at the same point, we're sort of all stuck in this rural county with unique problems that none of us feel really have a voice. So in
Yeah.
some ways, getting people out here to understand these rural issues is one of the things we really should be doing regardless of political party.
Yeah. And just kind of a side note, as many people know, and I'm not from here. I spent the first 30 years of my life in Washington State, and I had quite a bit of a learning curve when I came here. And it's funny for me to watch Democrats come into Northern Nevada and try all these different tactics to catch attention, because it's almost like I get to remember back when I was trying to figure everything out, and watching them make some of the same mistakes has actually been a little amusing for me. So just a side note.
Well, no, I don't think it's a side note, and nor do I think it's limited to the Democrats. I think this is something that's very interesting. That's sort of playing out is, and this is part of the reason I was fully on board with us doing those interviews with Cody Whipple and Dave Flippo, because one of the things I'm really interested in is how do those political cultures in the rurals and the urbans are totally different, right? And bridging them really takes that takes a lot of agility, for lack of a better term, right? You have to really understand how different these issues are. And again, with the CD2 race, that's just, I mean, this is an insane number of candidates. Some really understand the issues, right? So James Settlemeyer is probably going to be one of the stronger of the two candidates. Dave Flippo might be the other. There's some speculation that a couple of the other candidates in there might actually be good. We'll have to see how that chips out. But James Settlemeyer, of course, now a conservation director in Nevada, rancher out of Douglas County. He really understands the northern issues. He really understands the water issues and some of the other stuff.
And he's for the Nevada legislature. And if anybody, a whip is the one that goes around and collects all the votes and gets Congress. So this guy can herd cats. Okay, he's a proven cat herder, which is an amazing skill set.
You're right. And it showed up a bit at the breakfast we had Sunday morning. We were trying to organize everybody to get ordered. James was finally going, okay, we're ordering now. Get your act together, right? It's that old whip skill set coming forward.
Yeah.
But, you also have candidates. This is their first foray. Of course, up here, a lot of them are coming out of Reno and Washoe County. They're coming out of an urban perspective. And it's incredible how many of those even there, and I don't want to mention names, but how many of them are coming out of Reno environment that this is like, except for driving up and down I-80, this is really their first extended trip in Elko, because it's 5 hours from Reno.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get up to speed because it's not the same. Just to take a simple example, we're going through this whole thing with, if you're on the western side of the state, Vegas and Reno, California gas is where you get your gas. Refineries in California that are closing. Right.
Yeah.
So that's causing real problems. But over here in Elko, our supply chain comes from Salt Lake City. So there's a slightly different need and perspective over here on the eastern side of the state that needs to be understood in terms of this. So, the CD2 race is exposing some interesting fissures, even within rural Nevada, even within the 775.
And again, I really enjoy watching. You can tell, like, the body language in the rooms. You can tell the people who aren't sure because they've never really been to the rural areas, and maybe people are running around with guns or something. I don't like watching their body language. They're so unsure, and it's fun to watch them and interact with the rurals and watch how that plays out. It's kind of fun to watch, actually.
Right, and we do sneaky stuff. So, of course, we have a lot of our state level candidates, of course, are coming out of the Vegas area. Some from Reno, but a lot of them live down in Vegas for, treasurer and attorney general and whatnot. Which,
Come on, I wouldn't call it sneaky. I just say we give people enough rope to hang themselves.
no. What I mean was the sneaky part. Is of course a couple of them were up there and we're talking with them, and so Saturday night was our Lincoln Day dinner. Sunday lunch down in Ely, White Pine County's Republican Party was holding their Lincoln Day event. So a lot of us spent the night in Elko and headed down for the roughly 3 hour drive down from Elko to Ely, which of course goes down US 93. And some of you might remember when we did the Whipple and Flipple interviews. And I go back to that because that was really what sparked our interest in these rural urban divides from an electoral perspective, because we didn't think we'd have to, really deal with it with Amodei. Well, now we do. But some of these state candidates, I made a point of pointing out to them, look, when you're going down from Elko to Ely, I want you to do something. You're going to be going most of the trip down US 93, count the semis, right? And one of the candidates is like, because like, why are we doing that? It's like a kids game. And I said, you're going to be shocked at how much semi traffic. And they asked me, they're like, well, what's going on up here that's increasing this traffic? And the truth is, it has nothing to do with what's going on up here. It's the fact that North Las Vegas in particular set up these massive distribution warehouses. That traffic that's flowing through these rural areas is going to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Right? It isn't us. And, it's something.
It's a multi-state issue. I mean, if I were to drive a semi truck through California, I'm hitting $6 a gallon gas, whereas if I drive through Nevada, I'm going to be paying $1 or $2 cheaper. So really, it's the quickest route to kind of circumvent California. That's also why we have so much semi traffic here.
Well, and they're also avoiding I-15 and having to go through Salt Lake.
Right.
No disrespect to our friends, but they waited about 20 years too late to update their highway system. So downtown Salt Lake's just an absolute mess right now as they're trying to get it up to speed, worse than Las Vegas, if one can believe that. But it is something a lot of these candidates need to hear, right? And really see some of the issues, right? I mean, we're fortunate. We love the rurals, but, some of this stuff is really impacting us in ways that if you don't live here, you never see.
Hey, I met someone that they were running for a position that I never really gave much thought to, the Nevada treasurer title. So one of the candidates came up and introduced themselves, and I was like, I'm so sorry to out my ignorance here, but what does the treasurer do? And he was on it. He was like, well, Nevada has a portfolio of investments, and I'd like to get in there and change that portfolio. And we started talking about the new Fed chair coming in and the environment for different bond markets. And he was actually on point. Yeah.
Right. And both of them are, to be fair, because I've had lengthy conversations with both of them. I got, part of it is I got involved in something. One of the candidates is very much a numbers person. The other is very much a policy person.
Yeah.
And I've been doing on my Rurals in Nevada, the Rurals in Nevada Substack thing. This got into this argument we're having about the nonpartisan numbers, whether it's a choice people are becoming nonpartisan in Nevada or it's a consequence of automatic voter registration at the DMV. And it's interesting because in that capacity, I've been talking to both of them that even though they're running for treasurer, they're very much interested in either the statistical or policy issues that's going on with it. So it is really interesting, right? And then Andy Matthews, of course, he's running unopposed in the primary. He's our current state controller. And in his standard Lincoln Day dinner joke, of course, we all go to,
Yeah, I couldn't turn off the lights at the governor's mansion if Lombardo wasn't nice to him. I see how he would.
Well, that's good, but the one that really kills the crowd is when he says, "Okay, I want everybody in here to put your hand up if you know what the controller does." And of course, only about 5 hands go up. He's actually the one that writes the checks, right? So the treasurer does the investment, he collects the taxes. The controller's the one that actually spends the money. But it's funny that it's one of these, it's one of the 6 constitutional offices under the Nevada Constitution that's elected statewide. And as Andy says, I've been in this office 4 years, and my wife still doesn't know what I do. Right. So
that's like if you're going to run for office and be in a position of power, I'd rather be not also dealing with the public as much. I just like to do my job and do it well. It's a challenge to do your job well as a politician and go back to your constituency and explain your job too. It's almost 2 different jobs in one.
Well, and that came up. Of course, one of the things that kicked off this week is the governor did sort of a grassroots appreciation event reception with him up in Reno that a lot of us from the rural counties got invited to. So we all go over. And what we saw at the Lincoln Day dinner was sort of a truncated version of that speech, and that truncated. So sure, and one of the things he left off, and I don't know if you caught this, you're the business person, but in that speech in Reno, he was talking about, one of the problems being a politician is, yeah, you could say I run the office and I got so much to vote, but then after the term, what's your return on investment? What's your ROI? Right? What have you actually done? And thinking about going through and explaining, okay, here's what I actually got accomplished. It wasn't everything, but here's what I've done. Here's what you got for voting with me, and please vote for me again in the next 4 years.
Mhm.
Right? So
Yeah.
it's all kinds of interesting. This CD2 race is going to be interesting. It's going to take a while to whittle down that field. Some more. I mean, I like the candidates. Right? Some of them are more prepared for this than others, I'll just say. But that's always the case, right? And it's gonna be fun over the next couple months to watch them come through. So, have you really been following some of your local smaller races at the county level?
Have I?
Yeah.
We have our county convention coming up at the end of this week, and a lot of the interaction among the candidates will take place starting at a later time. But we've seen them. You and I have been at the NRC lunches and a few of the different organizations. It's always from amongst the group, so I'm sure we've met most of the candidates around here. But really, for me, for my own personal reason for running and the campaign that I'm trying to run, I'm really making an effort to stay very genuine to who I am. So I'm going to poke my head in and meet all the other candidates and see what they're doing. But for the most part, I really want to stay true to who I am, just for the benefit of the district that might elect me.
Right. Well, what I'm more interested in is some of the lower level stuff that's going on. I mean, small town politics. You ran for county commission up in Humboldt, and you and I have talked a little bit about some of the small town politics involved there.
Very different.
Yeah. But we're sort of caught up. So we have 2 county commission seats open. Of course, I didn't draw an opponent, but I'm the district, one of the 5 districts I'm representing for the commission. We're pretty much not only strongly Republican, although we do have one of the larger Democratic blocks here in the county. But we don't have, Elko County is actually sort of the headquarters of the Independent American Party of Nevada, which is our largest third party. The other commission district that's up, District 4, Travis Gerber, he's running as an incumbent, he ends up actually drawing an opponent from that IEP because the IEP headquarters is sort of within his district.
You're in the game.
Yeah, so it's sort of interesting. He's going to have to run against a third party candidate, right? So that's going to be interesting for me to watch, just as a commentator, right? Travis and I served together on the Debt Management Commission up here, or Debt Management Board, and have worked together on projects on and off over the years. And I have to say, his younger brother Zach is, sort of my attorney for my businesses, right? Handles my business paperwork if I need it. But that being said, it's interesting that at the local level, we tend to have up here third parties are really the ones who throw problems in. But we also have a very nasty mayor's race emerging here in the city of Elko, which is going to be fun to watch as well, right? Yeah, no, and it's, of course, mayor's races in Nevada tend to be nonpartisan, right? But there's just some internal issues. And again, going back, a lot of it has to do with, where's the city of Elko? And just in case anybody missed it, there's the city of Elko and then there's Elko County, right? City of Elko is the county seat of Elko County. But it's the city of Elko that actually has a very contentious, and there's, in addition to the mayor's race, there's two of 4 city council seats open. And I think we have 6 candidates for those 2 seats. Yeah. So this is actually going to be a very interesting election locally, just in the city. And that's going to be one of the things that actually might help with the main problem, or the main point of interest right now for, I think, the 2026 election, not just in Nevada, but more broadly, is the question of turnout.
Yeah. The city of Las Vegas itself is actually just a tiny little strip. The strip that people typically know as Las Vegas Boulevard, where the main hotels are. But there's actually 7 cities in the city of Las Vegas, and there's multiple townships. So there's all sorts of different types of races going on. But what I can tell you is What's going to be different in Clark County this time around is Jill Douglas, the Clark County Republican Party leader, is really getting the door knocking campaign going. So for the first time, we're going to have conservatives and Republicans going out and knocking on doors and interfacing with people. And I'm really excited to see if that helps swing some independent voters, if that face-to-face time, because I've always felt like the biggest issue with Republicans is their branding. The Democrats have branded us as big, mean people and not to talk to them because they'll say something evil that will, I don't know what they think, but I've always thought that if you had face-to-face time, people would see that we're human beings that are reasonable, so I'm excited to see how that campaign goes.
That's going to be interesting as well, because something else that's come out here recently, and I should have tracked it down. I didn't know you were going to go in this direction, but there's just an article that came out over the weekend that one of the strategies the Democrats seem to be applying in certain areas right now is going out and doing these like 10-minute conversations when they're door knocking. And they're recording them. And these conversations are along the lines of, okay, what kind of issues are bothering you at the moment? What do you want to see changed? They're recording them and then feeding it into an AI system to develop sort of a prioritization of issues they ought to hit. I'm sort of leery about that because this basically is a variation of the polling question, right? That if you ask people, 87% of Americans support doing something about gun violence, and the Democrats are always flustered when, they won't. No, they're never able to ban guns, even though 87% of people want stuff done by gun violence, right? And the issue is, banning guns isn't the only option, right? Yeah. So I'm not sure about this, but it does get back to that. Out here in the rurals where door knocking isn't really effective, right? We're just too dispersed. But more importantly, one of the things we're going to be looking at, and again, just to remind everybody, 2026 in Nevada is going to be one of those elections that happens every 12 years. Right, where we don't have a presidential nominee and we don't have one of our two Senate seats up, right? Yeah. So it's the representative that's really the top of the ticket. And one of the things that was really concerning us was, of course, that turnout was going to be low. Those are the elections you see the lowest turnout historically. Yeah. But now we got the CD2 race, which is going to bolster turnout up here in the north, I'm willing to bet. But we also have a number of ballot initiative issues. And that it's been a real question of how much that's going to drive out turnout, because issues tend to drive out nonpartisan votes. Nonpartisans, as a general rule, do not respond to personality-based campaigns.
Yeah.
They're issues voters. So stuff like ballot question 7, which this will be the second election that if it passes, and it passed in 2024 with 73% of the vote, this would put into the Nevada Constitution a requirement for voters to show ID when voting, very similar to the SAVE Act nationally, right, which you wanted to talk a little bit about here in a minute. Yes. That's going to be one of the issues. There's a new Protecting Girls Sports petition that's sponsored by the governor that's making go-arounds. We're probably also going to see another ballot question. It hasn't cleared the petitioning stage yet on open primaries, which is another heavily contested. And in fact, that article series I'm talking about with the nonpartisans, that's what that's in relation to, is how the growth of nonpartisans is driving this demand that we need to change Nevada's electoral laws. Right. So, those issues are probably going to drive out higher than normal turnout, at least here in the north.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up question 7. I actually got seated next to Dave Gibbs at the Elko Lincoln Day dinner, who is the one that created that initiative. Mm-hmm. And I got a chance to ask him all about it. I'm like, what does this take? He started this back in 2021. So this is going on a 5-year process for him, which is really impressive. He's a private citizen that wanted to make a difference in our state, and he did. I'm very impressed. I just wanted to make sure that he got credit for that. But one of the things I did get to ask him was, I'm like, well, we have the SAVE Act going through Congress. How do these two look side by side? What does it all mean? And I do want to talk about what the SAVE Act means, but he did make a very important point that if we codify it into Nevada law, no matter what the federal government does, that will be the way that we execute our elections. So he's like, it's important that we do this for us, and it'd be great to have that federal layer as well. But question 7 will allow us to take control of our elections, even if we can't do anything else about the rest of the states. But that does bring into question, if that SAVE Act gets passed and requires ID, what about states like California that go out of their way to say you can't ask for ID? And my head's about to explode thinking about the constitutional crisis that might come our way this midterm election. Do you have any way to start with that issue?
Yeah, well, I'd say first, you asked me a couple days ago, and I had to go back and think about it. It's quite possible that the SAVE Act wouldn't apply to 2026 because it'd be too late to get all the provisions in place, right?
Yeah, that's
I
my
mean,
guess.
it's actually been quite a burden out here for counties. Of course, Trump had that executive order last year requiring sort of a paper ballot,
Yeah.
printed out paper ballot, and it caused I mean, the county clerk's offices really had to scramble to try to get that set up. That's why, for instance, in a couple weeks, we're having a county clerk come out at one of our quarterly central committee meetings for our Republican Party and demonstrate this equipment. And the other parties are doing the same, just so our voters aren't shocked when they go in here and there's a new way that you're voting. But the on the SAVE Act more broadly, so one of the issues, of course, there's the federal supremacy clause, right? Article 6 of the Constitution. So even though states run elections, there are provisions for federal law to take precedence over state law. This was one of the things you saw when there was the effort back in Colorado and other states to keep Trump off the ballot for the 14th Amendment was their argument. And the courts have basically said you can't, states don't have the right to restrict federal candidates like that, right? That's just improper. My guess is, and again, Congress can pass any law they want. If somebody has a problem with it, then it becomes a lawsuit and then goes to the Supreme Court, right? A lot of people think that somehow the Supreme Court's involved with designing laws. They shouldn't be, and they're not. My guess is the first thing that would happen if a state like California said, we're not going to check voter IDs, is there would be a lawsuit, some sort of class action lawsuit, that the federal government, the federal courts would get involved, and California would lose very quickly. Right, or
Okay.
Washington or whoever. Now, again, we've talked a couple times. Washington actually has a provision that supposedly a state law bans businesses for checking for citizenship as part of your I-9 process for employment. That's also against federal law. It's just nobody's brought a lawsuit. It's absolutely right that we have a federal law that says to be employed, you have to be a citizen. That's supposed to go on a federal form, and you have states that just said we're just not going to do that. That's very problematic, and one of the things that's coming out here. So my guess,
They prohibit you as an employer to check their immigration status. So there's a direct conflict there that puts the business owner in a horrible position. And now this is going to happen with voting.
well, I don't think it's going to happen in voting. I mean, because I think there will be a lawsuit, but it'll be because people organized what beforehand to look for this stuff. The I-9 issue, my take is when it's going to come up is when the federal government goes and fines a business for hiring illegal employees, and they're saying I was prohibited by state law. That's what's going to generate the lawsuit, right?
And that would be the business suing the state for the law? Or
Well, there's going to be. I'd have to see. I don't really know how the specifics would work out. My guess is that, I mean, the federal government can sue now, right? If they're paying attention, they've got other fish to fry. But my guess is what might happen is either if a company gets a fine for not obeying federal law, checking that ID, then they would go sue the state. Or if there's something like, I don't know, somebody decides to conduct ICE raids in Seattle. That's when the federal government might move in and said, no, you've got this law and you can't do that, right? The Constitution clearly gives the federal government the right to control immigration policy. This is one of the few enumerated powers where there's no question about, and the states are going to lose, and they have been losing.
yeah. So let's talk about this play by play. Let's say next month, April, the federal Congress passes the SAVE Act. I would see the conservative states as immediately jumping on board and trying their best to make it for this election. Obviously, the liberal states are going to go the lawsuit direction and go their own course either way. And then we're going to have to wait for election returns after
Well,
or
um,
wait for the lawsuit to pass? Like, how are we going to have a full count on what's going on in our country?
Well, again, and again, I think I was sort of rethinking it. I think I was incorrect when we were talking, not on the show, but offline a couple weeks ago about this. My guess is that the SAVE Act passes, it would only take effect at the 2028 election. I can go back and check that. But so, there's a 2-year process. There almost have to be to get this really up and running. Some states are going to jump on it immediately. You're absolutely right about that. Some states are going to kick off as long. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if there's an initial effort by a state like California to file against the federal government claiming that the law is unconstitutional. It would take a while to wind its way through the courts. Although I have to say, for all the problems, this Supreme Court has been more willing than previous Supreme Courts to at least issue stays to allow a process to continue while they're debating the issues. That hasn't pleased a lot of people, but they're clearly recognizing, I think, and it's not just the conservatives; it's also the liberals, right? We've actually had a surprising number of 9-0 decisions come out of this Supreme Court that have caught a lot of people off guard. So I think they're cognizant that big issues are actually now. I mean, big issues are, all Supreme Court cases are big issues, but much more significant cases are coming up. And my impression so far is that the Supreme Court's really trying to take the time to let people hear it. But that would be my guess, is that you'd first have states trying to sue the federal government that this is illegal, that it's a burden, so on and so forth. But again, I think they're going to lose, and it's going to be decided before 2028.
Yeah. And I have one more quick question. I stop me if I'm going too far into the weeds here. But let's say the federal government doesn't accept election results from California for, say, their House of Representatives. Are we in a position where Congress continues until, just with those seats empty, until we can sort it out, and then we're just dealing with a smaller Congress? Or is Congress stopped until every seat is settled?
That's going to be an interesting question that's popped up increasingly. Where we've seen it is on presidents. I mean, all this stuff about January 6th and everything started with this idea that Congress ultimately has to certify the results for presidential election. Of course, the Constitution also includes these provisions that the respective bodies, the House and the Senate, have ultimate authority over their own members. Right now is to allow members who might have committed murder or high crimes or whatnot to be booted out without having to go through a different sort of process. My guess is it's not going to come to that. I think what's going to happen is Congress will go ahead and accept whatever results come out of the next election, right? But I think what it might trigger is what you'll find is the parties, both Republican and Democrat, might be challenging some of this at the state level.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be Washington saying the numbers are illegitimate. It's going to be parties at the state level, because ultimately the state certified the election.
Okay.
We saw this actually in 2000 with Bush v. Gore, right? The hanging chads.
Yeah.
Right?
Not Florida.
Yeah, and that was, and the Supreme Court tried to stay out of that as long as it could. And the interesting thing is, as it turned out, actually, by far the most interesting thing about all that case is when the final tallies were done and people have gone through and redone it, it looks like George Bush actually did win the election in Florida. Despite everything, it really was a Bush victory. But interestingly, that's also where the Help America Vote Act came from in 2002, which not only, it banned the type of hanging Chad machines and whatnot. That's an example of the federal government stepping in and overruling states on election policy, which is what the SAVE Act is going to play out. But it's also the HAVA Act that actually added some provisions to how you have to register to vote, the forms of ID you needed to do. And the ACLU actually advanced in 2002 this argument that those provisions deliberately discriminated against particularly married women because of name changes. It's the exact same argument that's being used against the SAVE Act 24 years later. The exact same argument. So that tells you, and again, HAVA's been requiring these documents, at least for registering, ever since. And what the argument is, well, now a woman might have her driver's license with her maiden name, which should be illegal anyway, right? But she'll have her driver's license with her maiden name, and she has to bring all this documentation to prove it. And it's sort of like, that's exactly why states issue marriage certificates. That is the number one reason marriage certificates exist, right? Is exactly to address this issue. And the SAVE Act allows that to be accepted. So it's a bizarre argument that 24 years later, this hoary old, that's Hoary, right? Gray-bearded argument is being dragged back out.
Yeah. Sounds right.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess the point is, for us here, is that the 2026 election is going to be exciting. Even as a midterm election, of course, here in the 775, we'll be closely following that CDO2 race. In fact, we've already had some requests for some candidates to potentially come on. So we'll look at that, and not just Republican candidates. I think both you and I have talked. It might be interesting to talk to some of the Democratic candidates in this race.
Want to? Both and I, we would jump at the chance. It's just no Democrat wants to talk to us.
No. I've actually had a couple reach out. So we just need to get schedules together, right?
I need to find an urban Democrat that's willing to talk to us.
That might be different, but if you are an urban Democrat, we're open, right? Because again, it's really the rural urban issue that we want to explore, right? And some of these perspectives. But in the meantime, if you want to get hold of Crystal and I, shoot us an email at info@775alive.com. But until then, I'm Scott Gavorski.
And I'm Crystal Newton.
And we'll see you around the 775.